It's time to start talking about some NBA awards. We've already talked about the MVP odds a little bit on this channel, so I want to start exploring some of the other ones, and the one that I always find the most interesting is the Most Improved Player Award. The former coach in me is always interested in people's development and things like that, so I always think it's cool that when we can take a chance to look at players that have taken that next big step in their career. I feel like this is the hardest one for people to evaluate as well, because are you looking at like a guy that just became a first-time All-Star or something like that? Or is it a guy that was just like at the bottom of the bench, now he's getting you like 15, 16 points a game or something like that, now he's maybe a starter or something? I feel like most of the time it's guys that take an All-Star jump, and spoiler alert, that's probably where the number one guy is going to fall this year. But I just want to take a look at some of these guys that are towards the tops of the voting charts right now and just talk about them. All right, the first guy we want to talk about is Alperen Sengun, the center for the Rockets. For those of you living under a rock, AP is probably the best player on this Rockets team. Currently, the Rockets are starting to fall off a little bit, which is unfortunate. I mean, this is a growth and development year for them. They have a lot of young players. They brought in a lot of vets to try and help the development of those young players, and we've seen good growth out of guys like Jabari Smith. Like, we still see all his defensive intensity and everything. Jalen Green, kind of iffy still. Like, the scoring numbers are good, but it's just not effective, and I think he's like a net like -10 or something for the Rockets. But anyway, AP, huge step up this year. I mean, we can just look at his like numbers alone right here, taking the jump from like 15 points a game to 21 points a game. Pretty substantial jump. And then, you know, once you cross that 20 point per game threshold, that's when we start looking at y'all in the NBA and we're like, wow, that guy's pretty elite right there. Some things that stand out for me, right? They're getting him more involved in the playmaking. They're using AP as more of a hub this year in Houston. The 5 assists a game, the turnovers are high, and that's definitely a downside of his game so far. In all fairness, like, the spacing's always pretty off in Houston, and like some of their game plan stuff is still kind of like, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but they're getting him more involved. The turnovers, he's going to figure those out. I mean, you mess things up enough time, eventually you start to learn from them, right? He's still only 21 years old. A lot of stuff to learn from that. The three-point shooting is the interesting one. Is he going to develop that at all? Because he's taking the shots. Like, he's getting up 2 of them a game right now, only hitting 29% of them. And again, not great spacing there in Houston. It's not always the best help on his team to help him create shots and everything, but where he really is finding success, is down low. Like, the physicality that he's brought this year is so interesting to me. Like, he's really putting shoulders into people, strong post moves, like really going up and into people. Like, it's actually been pretty fun to watch because there's not a ton of people that play like that in the NBA anymore. The other thing that's really interesting to me about Sengun is, like, I had a discussion with some people this summer about that. I'm like, he's like the most athletic, unathletic person like I've ever seen. Because there's like times where like he's like not jumping like at all on the court, and it just looks like difficult for him. Like, he'll do like those set shots or whatever where he doesn't even like leave the ground or whatever, or sometimes like he's not like jumping for rebounds and stuff like that. But like, if you let him get like a 1-2 with like a little bit of a leap, like, he will put people on posters. He's got such an underrated highlight reel. But that's just, I'm very curious about like why the athleticism is like kind of a come and go thing for him. That's just an interesting thing for me. Looking through some lineup data for AP here, and there's not like a ton to really look at because the Rockets are pretty this year. One thing to note is that his best lineup is one where Jalen Green isn't in the game, and I'm not here just to bash on Jalen Green like that, but it is interesting to me. Like, Jalen Green's not a very effective basketball player right now, and honestly, he causes a lot more problems than he benefits the team at the moment, and that's not hard to figure out or anything, but I'd be curious to explore, and I don't know if necessarily like subbing him out for an Aaron Holiday is the answer, but, you know, if we can find a more reliable 2 to put around like Sengun and stuff like that, I'd be curious to see what happens. But yeah, overall, really excited for AP. The last thing I want to touch on is like when Steven Adams becomes healthy next year and they get him back on the practice court and in the game, one, how many minutes does Steven Adams get to play for them? And also, how does that help him develop? I would imagine that Steven Adams is a pretty good on the court coach and vet to have in practice. So maybe we see another jump out of AP next year. I'll be curious to see. Next, let's talk about Jonathan Kuminga, a guy that's had a really like up and down season this year, hasn't he? Like, he had stretches where he was like really rough, and then he was like, you know what? I don't even really want to be here because Steve Kerr doesn't want to play me. And Steve Kerr was like, okay, I guess I'll throw you on the court and play you now. And he's had a lot of really good moments for him. We had a nice stretch here starting at around like the 38 game mark where he was just on a tear for a little bit, and it started to drop off a little bit again. It looks like the minutes are starting to get cut down again, so kind of an interesting thing to see, but a lot of positives in the plus minus. Obviously the Warriors have been winning like a little bit more recently, and where do they fall in the standings now? Yeah, they're the 10 seed at this point, so going up, but yeah, no, Kuminga's taken a jump this year for sure, and I think a lot of that is, you know, giving him the opportunity to be more of a ball handler. We can look at his numbers, and obviously this is the most improved player conversation, so let's take a look at, in comparison to last season. 10 points a game last year, about 15 and a half this year. The three-point shot has fallen off a cliff, unfortunately, and that just is what it is, right? Like, they got to find a way to correct that. The Warriors, ironically, have struggled to find shooting most of this season. But yeah, like, there's other areas that he's improving. Like, the assist numbers are going up, but the turnovers are also going up. And again, he's had more ball handling duties, but that's how a guy like him is going to get better. He's so athletic. He does have some handle to him, right? Like, he's got that quick first step. So giving him the opportunity to make some plays and be a playmaker and learn, like, that's just growing pains, right? And putting him in front of Şengün probably isn't where I'd have him. I'm doing this order based off of what the current like betting odds are and stuff. So they have Kuminga at like the 4th spot right now. But I do agree that he's probably in the top 5. He's had so many great moments this year, and obviously some of these stats are weighed down from the beginning of the season. But I'll be curious to see, like, developmental wise, and, you know, what do the Warriors do this offseason? Mike Dunleavy's been pretty open that he's trying to build something around Curry while he still can, right? And so does that mean he's taking Kuminga and shipping him off somewhere else for someone that maybe they don't have to wait for to develop? Hard to say. Not surprisingly, the lineup that he finds himself the most productive in are the ones that Kevon Looney aren't necessarily in, because I think when there's more spacing and Kuminga can kind of run around with all the other wings and guards on this team, I think there's just more room for him to operate. He wants to get to the rack, right, as much as possible. He doesn't want somebody waiting in the dunker spot or something like that, because we've seen he's not like the best playmaker yet or anything. So I'm not surprised to see that his best performances are when he's out there with like a Draymond Green playing center. Now this is where it gets interesting. So the Warriors with Kuminga off the court, minus 0.8 for offensive rating, or for the net rating, and then on the court plus 4.7. That's a pretty substantial difference right there. Like, that's the difference between a lot of NBA games, and that doesn't surprise me. There's not a ton of like athleticism on this team, and a guy that can just go out and run. And you do need guys like that when you have a lot of vets on the team, guys that can just go out and transition, get you some easy points, so that the old guys don't have to run up and down quite as much. So that's not a surprise to me either. But worth noting, Warriors a lot better with Kuminga on the court than off. Yeah, excited to see what happens with Kuminga, whether he's on the Warriors this year or excuse me, next year or the year after. Who knows, right? Either way, very interesting talent. I'm really annoyed that the Bulls tried to trade Caruso to get him, because that just wasn't going to happen. But needless to say, excited to see Kuminga's development. I hope they keep giving him chances to have the ball. All right, y'all, let's talk about J-Dub. Everybody loves J-Dub, right? He plays with a lot of energy, a lot of intensity, gets the ball out. Everybody gets the ball a lot in this OKC offense. It's a lot of catch, drive, kick, right? A lot of things like that. And obviously, this is only his second year, had a great season. Last year, 14 points a game as a rookie, shot at 35% from 3, a scorching 45% from 3 on 3.3 3-point attempts a game. Absolutely nuts. Almost 20 points a game while playing with guys like Giddey, Chet, Shea. Like, Lou Dort is no slouch out there, right? Like, there's plenty of dudes out there to go get buckets. I think what everybody notices the most, though, is Jalen Williams' ability to get out and run in transition. That's something that we saw when he was in college quite a bit. His ability to go get a rebound. He's a bigger, stronger guy for only being 6'5", only 6'5". I'm 6'5", so I feel bad calling myself short. But, you know, it's whatever. In basketball perspective, I'm like average height. But yeah, seeing him go up, get those rebounds, run the whole length of the court, and being able to either make a play, because the assist numbers are going up as well. You'd probably like to see the turnovers go down a little bit. But again, young, playing with a bunch of other young dudes, right? Like, plenty of time, but he's able to play make, he's able to create for himself, he can perform in isolations. Like, Jalen Williams looks like a phenomenal player. I'm just looking at the lineup numbers right here, and interestingly enough, I shouldn't say it's not interesting, it's not surprising to me. Obviously, the OKC Thunder starting lineup is just a net positive, right? It's a very good lineup. Great combination of players. The real jump for Jalen Williams is when they sub out Giddey for Isaiah Joe. And that doesn't surprise me because Jalen Williams does like to have the ball. He likes to operate. And so you bring in that lethal shooter in Isaiah Joe and you take out Giddey, who's maybe not as elite of a three-point shooter, right? And someone that does want the ball a little bit more. You see those numbers really shoot up. So come playoff time, that's going to be a dangerous lineup for them. Now, obviously, there's still room for improvement for J-Dub, right? That you could always cut down the turnovers and everything, right? There's moments where I think they go to him to ISO maybe a bit too much, but you know what? It's going to help him grow, right? Like as OKC builds this team up, they find how they want to play basketball a little bit more. Maybe they add some more shooting around their team. Maybe they get more of a run, jump, and dunk center or something. They might start to play a little more modern basketball, but it's exciting nonetheless, man. He's so good. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the league. So no surprise that they got him third on the list this year. All right, let's talk about one of my boys, Coby White. You know, in a Bulls season that has been pretty horrendous to watch, I'm really bummed that I haven't been able to enjoy Coby White as much. Now, as a Bulls fan, when they took Coby, I was kind of like, not really like feeling that. Like I just didn't feel like he was a very smart basketball player. And I was like, I feel like we just drafted a guy who his best role is as a like spark plug six man, kind of Jordan Clarkson, J.R. Smith-esque, if you will. And I still think that's kind of true, but it has been nice to see him take this jump. I mean, look at this, right? Like obviously he was involved in a lot of their early scoring and everything. And then they went and found a bunch of other point guards to throw on this team for whatever reason. And last year he kind of took a big drop off. He only started 2 games. And now this year he started every single game, 19 points a game. That's a substantial jump. And that's why he finds himself number 2 on this list, right? Is the substantial scoring jump. The assists, almost double what they were before. The turnovers, though, also really high. And that's the thing with Coby White. He's still just like not a good decision maker out on the court, but man, he is hitting those shots and he is hitting them from deep. 7.3 3-point attempts a game, shooting 38%. What's nice too, and the reason I'm pulling this up is to compare him just like creating his own shot versus the catch and shoot. He can play off ball as well. Like he's shooting 37% on catch and shoot 3-point attempts. So Coby White spraying from just everywhere right now. It's awesome. So offensively, he's looking really good. Defensively, he's been a lot more locked in this year. That's been awesome. Bulls team not winning though, so it's kind of some empty statistics, unfortunately, especially with Zach LaVine going down. Like it's just given him more and more opportunities to do things like that. Let alone you go from 12, 10 points a game up to almost 20 points a game, you're going to be in consideration for the MIP. So where has Coby White found his success? Well, the Bulls haven't found a ton of success overall this year, but what I do note is that him playing with Dosunmu, having another guard on the team, one that is probably a better decision maker, kind of taking over primary ball handling responsibilities, that's when the Bulls start to find a little more success, right? Like you see like Caruso in with him here, and you throw Dosunmu in, like I was saying, you start to find a little bit more success with that. Like obviously Caruso has been in with the starting lineup most of this year, and the Bulls starting 5 just hasn't necessarily been good, but that's also when Zach LaVine was in there, and they just couldn't find a way to click with him for whatever reason this season. But I think that's still Coby's best role. I don't see him as like a true point guard. I see him as a combo guard that can go score, right? Like I don't want him playmaking in the pick and roll too much, like expecting him to be making these flashy passes and getting all of his teammates involved. I truly think the Bulls should look to try and move him this year, say, hey, this is how valuable he could be. If you threw him on like the Timberwolves or something and just let him be their backup point guard, I think that would be absolutely perfect. Yeah, shout out Coby White. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to enjoy the nice scoring season he's had just because the Bulls are just such a train wreck to watch. They did beat Cleveland last night. That was a fun one to watch. I mean, good for them. But yeah, no, shout out Coby White, number 2 in MIP. Let's talk to the guy that's the clear front runner though. Yeah, no surprise here. Tyrese Maxey, the new all-star point guard for the Philadelphia 76ers. I gotta say, wasn't too high on Tyrese Maxey like coming in. I wouldn't say I was like down on him at all. I was just kind of like, these young guards coming out of Kentucky or whatever. I'm just never sure about them. Like, yes, they play a more NBA style offense there, but sometimes they play a little too fast, a little too out of control. Not really sure where he's going to fit in, but he has found a way to adapt to like every role that he's had in the NBA up to this point. Like, we got to give him credit. He came in when Ben Simmons was still there, and they were like, okay, Ben's going to be the primary ball handler and everything. He was like, okay. And then they're like, okay, now he's not playing, so you get to be the point guard. Okay, now James Harden is here. You have to play off ball again. Okay, now James Harden isn't here. You have to go be the best player on the court. okay, I can do that. And best player on the court, obviously, I should say best guard on the court. Now he has to be the best player on the court with Embiid down. But like, he has had to play every single role imaginable, and he is putting it together. Obviously, last year, he had a phenomenal season as well, the 20 points a game. We all were kind of saying at the end of the year, do we think he's going to be able to be an all-star this year? And he took that jump, right? Like, he came out scorching to start the year, and it has not slowed down. 26 points a game, shooting 37% on 8 attempts a game. Absolutely nuts. Even getting, like, almost 4 rebounds a game for a guy that's 6'2". Like, you love to see that. A guy that can just go up and get it and then start the break himself. Obviously, he doesn't really have anybody to run with on this team, but, you know, is what it is. The playmaking's been awesome. Like, we've seen a big jump in the assists, right? They've been kind of letting him run the offense this year with Harden gone. The turnovers, again, you could shrink that a little bit, but it's not a scary number by any means for how much more he's had the ball. You look at some more of the recent games too, he's been on a tear, and actually I do think a lot of that is because Buddy Hield's been on the team now, and Buddy Hield kind of has that effect on point guards like he did with Tyrese Halliburton, where like he draws so much gravity because of his shooting. He knows exactly how to space at all times, that gives him opportunities to get those assists, gets him runways to the hoop where he can create other things to happen. So bringing in Buddy Hield was a nice addition to this team. All right, now this is the statistic I really want to see, the on-off numbers for Tyrese Maxey, because especially as of late, I have to assume these things are pretty crazy. So off the court, plus 0.7s, Philly's still a good team. They had Embiid, so remember that for this statistic. But on the court, plus 4.3, yeah, big difference. There's just there's not a lot of other scoring going on Philadelphia right now, especially when Maxey's off the court. So it's no surprise to see that he's made such a big impact. And he's a good defensive player as well. Like, he's getting up in people's faces. He's energetic. He attacks closeouts well. I shouldn't say attacks closeouts. He does the closeouts well. It's almost Friday, y'all. It's almost Friday. Yeah, I think the nod alone that he jumped from kind of like that, hey, he's a really good young starter, to now he's a surefire all-star or whatever this season, I think that's what's going to get him the most improved player, right? That's usually what happens. That's why, like, Markkanen got it the year before and everything, and then people kind of forget about Markkanen then, like, he's still not, like, balling out this year. So let's hope that doesn't happen with Maxey. Probably a difference is that he plays in Philly and Markkanen's in Utah, and people just don't care about Utah as much. But, hey, shout out Tyrese Maxey. Shout out all these dudes that have really stepped their game up this year. A couple other dudes just to consider. Scotty Barnes probably in the conversation. Jalen Johnson probably in the conversation. So shout out to those two guys as well. But hey, you guys let me know what else you want to hear me talk about and everything. We'll probably talk about like 6-man awards at some point too and shit like that. But hey, always appreciate it. The Atlanta Hawks series is coming back tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. And I'll be dropping 2 next week because there's been a lot of love for it so far, so really appreciate that. But yeah, subscribe, like, leave a comment so that YouTube stops yelling at me to tell you guys to do so. But really appreciate it, y'all. We'll see y'all later.